She thought it would be just one night, no strings, no names, no promises, just the comfort of a stranger's warmth under city lights that felt lonelier than ever. Natalie never imagined how deeply one decision, one whispered yes, would echo through the rest of her life. She hadn't planned to meet anyone. She certainly hadn't planned to feel something. And yet, when their eyes met across the bar, something inside her stirred. He was quiet, composed, the kind of man who didn't look like he belonged in a place like that, yet carried himself like he owned it. She noticed the loosened tie, the barely touched drink, the way his eyes lingered, like he saw more than he should. What followed wasn't loud or reckless. It was slow, magnetic, a connection that shouldn't have meant anything, but felt like everything. They were strangers, and for one night, they were more than that, until morning came, and he was gone. Have you ever felt like time paused for a single moment, only to come crashing down the next day? Have you ever let your guard down just once, and wondered if you'd ever feel safe again? Have you ever looked back on a decision that felt small at the time, but later changed everything? Natalie has, and she hasn't been the same since. What she shared with him wasn't supposed to matter. It wasn't supposed to follow her, but it did. It crept into her dreams, lingered in her mornings, haunted her in ways she couldn't explain. And the worst part, she didn't even know his last name, only that he left behind a silence she couldn't shake. And something else, something she didn't yet understand, something that would grow louder with time. She tried to forget, tried to bury that night with all the other mistakes she never meant to make. But the truth has a way of finding you, especially when you're not ready for it, especially when the past comes knocking, and he's standing on the other side of the door. Who was he really? Why did he disappear? And what happens when two strangers are forced to confront a night they never thought would follow them? Stick around, because what started as a fleeting connection is about to unravel into something far more complicated, and maybe, just maybe, something real. This isn't just a story about chance meetings. It's about consequences, secrets, and the kind of love that doesn't come easy, but refuses to let go. If you've ever believed that even one night can change everything, like this video and comment, I believe in fate, because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it finds you. New York City was alive that night. Taxi horns tangled with jazz from an open lounge door, and laughter spilled into the sidewalks like champagne, light and fizzy, easy to enjoy if you weren't carrying anything heavy inside your heart. Natalie was. She stood near the revolving doors of the Lexington Sky Hotel, arms crossed, chin tilted toward the moonlight that trickled between skyscrapers. The city usually made her feel infinite. Tonight, it made her feel small. She hadn't planned to go inside, but something about the warm gold glow from the bar windows and the tired ache in her bones made her step through the doors anyway. Inside, the hotel lounge pulsed with quiet elegance. Marble floors, soft leather booths, low-hung chandeliers that cast everything in candlelit shadows. A pianist played something slow and aching. Jazz with a heartbeat. Natalie slid onto a stool at the far end of the bar and ordered something she couldn't pronounce, just for the novelty. She wanted to feel different, lighter, maybe even wanted. She didn't notice him watching her. Alexander Grant had never felt more out of place in his own city. CEO of Grant Industries, owner of half the skyline, and yet here he sat, alone at the corner booth of a hotel bar, nursing a whiskey that had gone warm. His blazer hung over the chair beside him. His tie was loose. His phone vibrated with messages he had no desire to read. For once, he wanted to be anonymous, unremarkable, just a man with a drink and a night off. And then, he saw her. She wasn't dressed to stand out, and yet something about her presence pulled at him like gravity. Not just her beauty, it was the way she sat. Tired, like him. Guarded, like him. Like someone who had made herself invisible for far too long, and forgot she could be seen. She brushed a curl behind her ear, sipping from her glass with one hand and fiddling with her necklace with the other. It was such a small, ordinary movement, but it made his chest ache. Natalie felt his eyes before she saw his face. She looked up, meeting a gaze that was striking, not just because of the blue, but because of the way he looked. Present, not scanning the room, not distracted, just there. He didn't smile, not at first, but he raised his glass slightly in a quiet gesture. She blinked, then looked away, her cheeks flushing without warning. She hated that it flustered her. But something about that man made her nervous in a way she didn't want to escape. Moments passed, then footsteps. Then, "Is this seat taken?" She looked up. He stood beside her, tall, a little rumpled, like he'd been fighting the day and had finally surrendered. His voice was low, warm. "Velvet on stone." "No," she replied, clearing her throat. "Go ahead." He sat, careful not to crowd her. There was space between them, but also not enough. "I'm Alex," he said, offering a hand. Natalie. No last names. No mentions of careers or obligations or carefully curated lives. They talked about music first, the pianist's moody interpretation of old jazz standards, then about the weather, the city, how impossible it was to find real quiet in Manhattan. She was smart, quick, quietly funny. He was thoughtful, intense, occasionally distracted like someone whose brain was always solving something. But around her, Alexander found himself relaxing in ways he didn't recognize, laughing at her dry commentary, asking real questions, and actually listening to the answers. Natalie wasn't used to that. She told him about her favorite books, and he confessed, half-jokingly, that he hadn't read anything that wasn't a contract or board memo in years. They laughed. It felt easy, unforced. "You don't seem like the type to be in a hotel bar on a Wednesday," she teased lightly. "Neither do you." He didn't tell her he owned the suite upstairs, or that he had 6 unread messages from his board, or that he'd canceled a dinner with potential investors just to be alone tonight. He didn't want to be Alexander Grant, the CEO. He just wanted to be Alex. And with her, he could be. They talked for an hour, maybe 2, and in that time, the air between them changed. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't flirtatious in the way most bar encounters are. It was quiet, slow-building tension, eye contact that lingered too long, smiles that meant more than they said. When she laughed at something he said and placed her hand lightly on his arm, he didn't move. Her fingers stayed for just a second too long. And when he reached to pick up his glass, his pinky grazed hers. She felt it like a spark. There was a pause after that, the kind of silence that begs for a decision. "Would you want to get out of here?" he asked quietly, almost hesitant. Natalie felt her pulse in her throat. She wasn't that kind of woman. She had rules, boundaries, but there was something in his voice, not expectation, but hope. So she nodded, just once. Yes. The elevator ride was quiet. Their hands brushed once, then didn't move away. When the doors opened, he guided her into a penthouse suite that looked like it belonged to a man with secrets. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan lit up like a map of stars. He didn't rush. They stood in silence for a moment, both uncertain now that the door had closed behind them. "We don't have to," he said, stepping back. "I know." She moved toward him, and he met her halfway. The first kiss was tentative, gentle. The second was not. What happened next was not careless, not rushed, not just physical. It was deliberate, 2 people carefully unraveling themselves. He kissed her like he hadn't kissed anyone in years. Slowly, as if memorizing her, she touched him like someone who didn't know when she'd feel safe again. But somehow, she did. There were whispered apologies for invisible scars. Quiet laughter when they bumped into the edge of the bed. The kind of intimacy that came not from lust, but from emotional weight. Like they were both drowning and finally found air. As they lay tangled in sheets, wrapped in moonlight and silence, Natalie whispered something without thinking. "You don't seem as lonely anymore." He turned his face toward her on the pillow. "I'm not." They didn't say goodnight. They just drifted off, with fingers laced, bodies close, and the faintest sense that maybe this night would mean more than it was supposed to. Natalie woke to softness, not just the plush-down pillow beneath her cheek or the impossibly high thread-count sheets, but a gentleness in the air, a hush. For one suspended moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the memory came rushing back, his touch, his laugh, the way his breath had hitched when he kissed the hollow of her neck. The sound of jazz floating beneath the hotel room door. The feel of hands that didn't rush, eyes that didn't look through her but into her. She reached out instinctively, but her hand met empty space, cool sheets, a slight indentation where he'd lain, and nothing else. Her eyes fluttered open. The room, the penthouse suite, was dim, sunlight slipping through a crack in the curtain. She sat up slowly, wrapping the sheet around her. Her heart beat with something she couldn't quite name. Disappointment? Confusion? A hollow ache? Maybe all three. The room still smelled like him, cologne and cedar and something clean and masculine. There was no sound but the low hum of the city far below. She scanned the room. His jacket was gone. His shoes. His watch that he'd left on the dresser the night before. But on the pillow beside her, a note, folded neatly. Hotel stationery. Her hand hovered before she finally picked it up. Had an urgent work call. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. Last night was incredible. Alex Natalie stared at the paper until the words blurred. It wasn't cruel. In fact, it felt sincere, but it was still a goodbye. She let the note drift to the nightstand and sat in silence. Natalie Simmons had learned early how to be okay with goodbyes. Her father had walked out when she was 5, leaving nothing but a faded denim jacket and a stack of unpaid bills. Her mother, Marissa, had worked 2 jobs, barely home, always tired. Love, Natalie had learned, was unreliable. It came in flashes, and it left just as fast. She'd become self-reliant, kept her expectations low, earned a scholarship, graduated early, and built a quiet life in the city. She worked as a junior editor at a boutique publishing house, long hours, modest pay, but enough to keep the rent covered and the fridge semi-stocked. She didn't date much. Love had rules she didn't understand. But last night, with Alex, she'd let herself forget that. Just for one night, she had let herself be touched, seen, held without fear. And now, reality was back. She gathered her things slowly, methodically. Dress, shoes, earrings, purse. But when she reached the polished dresser near the minibar, something else caught her eye. A card. Business. Minimalist. Expensive stock. She picked it up and turned it over. Alexander Grant, CEO. Grant Industries private office, Upper Manhattan. She blinked. No, that wasn't possible. Alexander Grant. Even she, who barely read headlines, had heard of him. He was everywhere. Forbes, finance networks, architectural digests that gushed over his skyscrapers and silent power plays. Real estate mogul, billionaire bachelor, heir to a crumbling empire he'd somehow rebuilt from scratch after his father's scandal. That Alex? She felt her stomach twist. The man she'd spent the night with, the one who'd kissed her like she was more than a moment, the one who had laughed like he hadn't in years, wasn't just a stranger. He was Alexander Grant, and suddenly, he didn't feel like Alex at all. Natalie paced the suite, the card still in her hand. He hadn't told her, hadn't even hinted. He'd used only his first name. He hadn't mentioned work, wealth, or legacy. He'd let her believe he was just another tired soul in a hotel bar. Was that manipulation? Or protection? She didn't know. She thought about the way he'd looked at her, the way his voice had caught when he'd said, "I haven't felt this alive in a long time." It hadn't seemed fake, and yet, the omission stung, because once again, someone had left before she could figure out what they really wanted. The elevator ride down was slow. When the doors opened, the lobby buzzed with the start of the city's day. Business people with laptops, tourists with coffee, concierges smiling plastic smiles. Natalie walked straight through the doors and into the noise. Cars honked. A cyclist cursed. Sunlight bounced off windows too clean. She walked for 10 blocks before realizing she hadn't chosen a direction. Just away. Monica Patel had been Natalie's best friend for almost 9 years. They'd met in college during a chaotic freshman orientation and bonded over a broken vending machine and mutual sarcasm. While Natalie was cautious, grounded, and quietly intense, Monica was kinetic, big-hearted, outspoken, and wickedly smart. A Brooklyn-born marketing exec who could out-argue any man in a boardroom and quote Jane Austen in the same breath. Monica was Natalie's voice when she lost hers. Her mirror. Her reality check. That afternoon they met at their usual cafe, an indie spot with dusty bookshelves and caramel lattes that tasted like happiness. Natalie sat across from Monica, twisting the business card in her hand. Monica sipped her chai and raised an eyebrow. "Okay, you look like you either found religion or committed a felony. Spill." Natalie hesitated, then handed her the card. Monica read it once. Then again. Her eyes widened. Hold. Up. Natalie gave a weak smile. "Yep. You slept with Alexander freaking Grant? Didn't know it was him. Girl." Monica leaned back, visibly recalibrating. "Okay, talk. What was he like? Was it incredible and confusing and short-lived. Monica's humor faded. He left. Natalie nodded, left a note. No number, just that. She gestured toward the card. Monica was silent for a beat, then leaned forward. Do you want to see him again? Natalie exhaled. I don't know. I mean, he didn't lie. But he didn't tell me either, and now that I know who he is, it feels off. Monica tilted her head. So what are you gonna do? Nothing. Natalie's voice was quiet, resolute. It was one night, no strings. I'm not going to chase someone who lives in a world I don't understand. Monica raised her brow. You sure? Natalie nodded. But it didn't feel like the truth. Natalie's apartment was small, just enough room for her books, a modest kitchen, and a battered armchair she'd rescued from a curb. It was hers. Safe. Familiar. She set the card on her nightstand, hesitated, then tucked it into a drawer. Not trash, but not on display either. She stood at her window, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. Her reflection stared back at her. A woman who'd taken a risk, a woman who'd felt something real. And now, a woman pretending she hadn't. Natalie pulled on her favorite oversized hoodie, tied her hair into a messy bun, and curled onto the couch with a blanket in her thoughts. She wanted to forget him, but her body remembered the warmth of his skin. Her heart remembered the way he'd looked at her, like she was something sacred in a world made of noise. She closed her eyes and whispered to the empty room. It's okay. I knew it couldn't last. But the truth clung to her chest like smoke. She had let herself believe. And belief, for someone like Natalie, was the most dangerous thing of all. Life has a funny way of pretending nothing has changed, even when everything inside you has. The morning after the hotel suite, Natalie did what she always did. When something hurt, she compartmentalized. She returned to work at Langston and Morrow Publishing, threw herself into manuscript deadlines and marketing meetings, and made small talk with the receptionist like she wasn't constantly rewinding one night in her mind. At first, she thought she was fine. Heart bruised, sure, but fine. Until she wasn't. It started subtly. A wave of dizziness when she bent to retrieve a dropped pen. Nausea while riding the subway, the kind that came and went, creeping into her mornings like fog. Then came the fatigue. Bone-deep exhaustion that made her press her forehead to her desk and will her eyes to stay open during staff meetings. She blamed stress, bad sushi, the emotional fallout of sleeping with someone she couldn't stop thinking about. But then, she was 5 days late, then 7, then 12. She stood in the cramped pharmacy aisle with a box of pregnancy tests in her hand, heart hammering so loudly she thought the clerk might hear it. She didn't buy one. She bought 3. It was 5:12 a.m. on a Monday when she took the test. She sat on the edge of her bathtub in her sleep shirt, the city still sleeping outside her window. She didn't need to wait the full 2 minutes. The result appeared fast, unforgiving, 2 pink lines. Her hand shook as she reached for the second test. Same result. And the third. She stared at all 3 as if they were written in a language she couldn't understand. Positive. Pregnant. Pregnant. She dropped a plastic stick onto the tile floor. Her breath stuttered. Her vision blurred. And then, she sobbed. She didn't cry often, not like this. But the tears came like a flood, hot and panicked and raw. She curled into herself, palms over her face, breath hitching with every shuddering exhale. This couldn't be real. It was just one night. Just one night. Natalie showed up at Monica's door 20 minutes later wearing slippers, a hoodie, and no explanation. Her hair was barely brushed, her eyes red. Monica took one look and stepped aside. You want wine or waffles? Natalie's voice cracked. I'm pregnant. There was a long silence. Then Monica, always the rock, moved toward her with slow care and wrapped her in a tight, grounding hug. Okay, she whispered. We're going to breathe, and we're going to talk, and then we'll figure it out. 3 days later, Natalie sat in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and hand sanitizer, clutching the edges of her denim jacket. The nurse called her name, and the room shifted. The pregnancy test at the clinic confirmed what she already knew, but it was the ultrasound that changed everything. The doctor smiled kindly as she turned the screen. Congratulations, she said. You're having twins. Natalie blinked. What? The doctor pointed to the screen. 2 heartbeats, see? One here, and one here. Natalie stared, unable to breathe. Twins. 2. Her vision swam. Her ears buzzed. Somewhere in the fog, she heard herself whisper, I can't do this alone. That night, Natalie sat in the half-lit corner of her bedroom, knees pulled to her chest, the ultrasound photo trembling in her hands. She looked at the black and white smudge. 2 shapes, tiny and undefined, but beating. Alive. She couldn't stop crying. She wasn't ready. She didn't have money saved. Her job paid just enough to scrape by in the city. Her insurance barely covered her prescriptions, let alone the cost of a high-risk twin pregnancy. She didn't own a car. She barely had space in her 1-bedroom apartment for a coffee table, let alone 2 cribs. And she was alone. So alone. Her hand drifted to her stomach, her voice a broken whisper. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Natalie remembered the nights her mom had come home from the diner smelling like fryer grease in desperation. She remembered doing homework by candlelight when the power had been shut off. She remembered swearing that if she ever had kids, they'd never feel unwanted. They'd never feel abandoned. And now here she was, about to become a single mother to twins from a man she hadn't heard from in weeks. A man whose world was galaxies away from her own. She could have ended the pregnancy. The thought had crossed her mind in the dark. But when she'd seen the heartbeats on that screen, she knew she couldn't. These weren't just consequences. These were lives. She spent the next week in a fog. She went to work. She smiled when necessary. But everything inside her was unraveling. She made spreadsheets of diaper costs, Googled daycare she couldn't afford, created a second bank account labeled Emergency Baby Fund. She stopped buying takeout, canceled her streaming subscriptions. Every night, she lay in bed with her hands over her stomach, whispering to the babies inside her, I don't have a lot, but I have love. I'll protect you. I'll fight for you. I'll be enough. Monica didn't press. She came over with groceries. She scrubbed Natalie's bathroom. She painted a hand-me-down crib they found on Craigslist. One night, Monica left a journal on Natalie's pillow. The inscription read, You're stronger than this moment, and this moment is already making you stronger. Natalie cried for an hour after reading it. By her 6th month, Natalie was beginning to show. Her coworkers noticed, though they didn't ask. She had informed HR quietly, afraid of how time off might affect her job security. But the bigger question lingered. Should she tell him? Should Alexander Grant, the stranger who unknowingly left more than just a memory behind, know that he was going to be a father? She wrestled with it every day. He was powerful, wealthy. He could help. But what if he took the babies from her? What if his lawyers came after her? What if he thought she was using him? Worse, what if he simply didn't care? She wrote letters and tore them up, typed drafts and deleted them. Sometimes she'd take out his business card and stare at it like it held the answer. It never did. One night in early February, Monica found her on the couch, surrounded by baby books and unopened mail. Still thinking about him? Natalie didn't look up. Every day. Then maybe it's time to stop thinking and start deciding. Natalie blinked. What if he doesn't want them? Monica sighed. Then you're no worse off than you are now. But what if he does? Natalie's silence said everything. This isn't about him, Monica added. It's about them. They deserve to know. One day they'll ask, what do you want to tell them? That their father didn't care, or that he never had the chance to? In her 5th month, Natalie wrote the letter by hand. She kept it simple. She explained who she was, where they'd met, that she expected nothing. But she thought he deserved to know. She included her phone number, her due date, her OBGYN's contact. She didn't reread it. She just sealed it, dropped it in a mailbox, walked away, and waited. There are different kinds of silence. The kind that comes when a conversation ends. The kind that lingers after a goodbye. And then there's the kind that fills your lungs like water, slow, suffocating, and impossible to scream through. That was the silence Natalie lived in. After the letter was sent, the days blurred. Every vibration of her phone made her heart race. Every unknown number made her palms sweat. She checked her email, her voicemail, even her spam folder. Nothing. No text, no call, no response. Alexander Grant had disappeared from her life once. But this time, he knew the truth. And still, he said nothing. But the silence hadn't started there. It had begun months earlier, back when she first realized she was pregnant. when she started trying to tell him, and couldn't. Dear Alex, I know this will sound crazy, but I think something happened that night. Delete. I'm not sure how to say this. I didn't plan for it, neither did you. But backspace, backspace, backspace. You probably don't remember me. Tear, trash, repeat. She wrote letters by hand and never mailed them, typed messages on her phone and never hit send. She even called the number on the business card once. It rang 5 times, then voicemail. You've reached the office of Alexander Grant. She hung up before the tone, because what would she even say? Hi, remember me? The girl from the hotel bar. Surprise, I'm carrying twins. It sounded insane. And then came the questions. The cruel, quiet questions she asked herself at 2 a.m., lying in bed with one hand on her stomach and the other over her mouth to muffle the sobs. What if he thinks I'm trying to trap him? What if he thinks I'm lying? What if he doesn't care? What if I ruin their lives before they even begin? Her therapist called it self-sabotage. Natalie called it reality, because women like her didn't end up with men like him. They ended up explaining to their children why they never met their father. The months passed slowly. Her belly grew. The babies kicked. The nursery corner of her apartment took shape. One hand-me-down crib from Monica's cousin, a thrifted changing table, and soft cream curtains that fluttered in the breeze like whispers from a future she still didn't fully believe in. She started talking to them, not loud, just little things. I'm here. We're gonna be okay. I don't have all the answers, but I'll never stop trying. One night, she sat with Monica on the floor, both of them eating ice cream from the tub, surrounded by unopened baby shower gifts. Natalie whispered it like a confession. I don't think he's ever going to respond. Monica didn't say he might. She didn't say you never know. She just nodded, held her friend's hand and said, then you'll do it without him. But something still pulled at her. Not for her. For them. The babies deserved to know. Not just the parts she could tell them, their favorite lullaby, the first time they kicked, how she used to talk to them during thunderstorms. They deserved to know where they came from. So in her 8th month she wrote one last letter. It wasn't perfect. It didn't beg. It didn't accuse. It didn't explain more than it needed to. It just said this, Dear Alexander, we met one night. You told me your name was Alex. I didn't know who you were until later. I didn't reach out sooner because I wasn't sure I should. But now, I think you deserve to know. I'm pregnant. With twins. They're due soon. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not after your money or your name. I just thought you might want to know. If you don't want to be involved, I'll understand. But if you do, here's my number. Natalie. She placed it in an envelope. No return address. Just her first name. Just the truth. She walked it to the blue mailbox by the corner bookstore. The one she always passed but never used. This time, she let the letter go. And then, she waited. 1 day passed. Then 2. Then 5. Then 10. Still nothing. She didn't cry. Not this time. Tears, she'd learned, were a luxury. There was laundry to do, bottles to sterilize, a hospital bag to pack. Reality didn't leave time for heartbreak. What would you have done in Natalie's place? Tell us in the comments. Should she have told him or stayed silent? At 36 weeks, Natalie's doctor told her the twins could come any day now. She nodded, wrote it down, smiled politely, then went home and vacuumed her entire apartment at 3 a.m. because the only thing more terrifying than being alone was being unprepared. She installed the car seats she borrowed from Monica's coworker, hung baby clothes in the closet she cleared out for them, made freezer meals she knew she'd forget to eat. Everything was ready, except her heart. That part would never be ready. On the night before her labor began, Natalie sat in the nursery chair she'd found on Facebook Marketplace. She rubbed her swollen belly and whispered one last promise. I don't know what's waiting for us, but we'll face it together, me and you, all 3 of us. She turned off the light, closed her eyes, and waited for the next chapter to begin. There are moments in life when time bends, not because of science, but because of emotion. Moments when the air stills, and nothing exists except what's right in front of you. For Natalie, that moment came in a hospital room just after sunrise. When her world split open, it began with pressure, then pain, then panic. She was 37 weeks and 2 days when her contractions started. The night was unusually warm, the city buzzing beneath her window like it knew something was coming. At first she thought it was false labor. She paced her apartment, drank water, tried to breathe. But by 3:11 a.m., she knew it was real. Her body had decided. It was time. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Monica drove like a woman possessed, hair still in rollers, fuzzy slippers on her feet, shouting at red lights as if they were sentient. "You're doing great," she repeated, again and again. "Just keep breathing. I swear if these boys come before we get to the ER, I'm suing the city." Natalie clutched her seatbelt, eyes clenched, whispering through gritted teeth, "I don't care how they come. Just make it stop hurting." By 4:30 a.m., she was admitted. Gown on. 4 in. By 5:45, she was dilated past the point of no return. There was no time to overthink, no time to cry, no time to be afraid. Just breath. Push. Scream. Repeat. Jacob arrived first. Tiny, slick with newness, crying with a sound that split Natalie's chest wide open. She barely had time to register it before Owen followed, minutes apart, smaller, quieter, but healthy. And just like that, she was a mother. The nurses congratulated her. The doctor smiled. Monica kissed her forehead and wept. But Natalie? She just stared at the 2 tiny lives cradled against her chest, one on each side, breathing, real. She didn't feel joy. Not yet. She felt awe and exhaustion and something deeper, a love that hurt. The babies slept against her skin while the machines beeped and the sun climbed over the city skyline outside her window. For the first time in hours, she closed her eyes, and the world faded. She didn't hear the knock, didn't stir when the door creaked open, didn't register the footsteps until the voice whispered, "Natalie." Her eyes flew open. At first, she thought she was dreaming. But there he was, soaked from the rain, breathless, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he belonged. Alexander. Time bent. He took one step into the room, then another, then stopped. His eyes dropped to the bundles in her arms. 2 sleeping boys. Fragile. New. His face, usually unreadable in photos always carefully composed, crumbled. His lips parted, but no words came. Natalie stared at him, heart thundering. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat closed, but her eyes said everything. "You're here. You came." He moved closer, slowly, like he was afraid to scare her. "I got your letter yesterday," he said quietly. I came as soon as I could." Natalie swallowed. She couldn't look away from his face. There was something different in his expression. Not control, not power, just awe. He reached the side of the bed, eyes fixed on the twins. "Are they?" He started, then faltered. Natalie nodded softly. "Your sons." The words hung in the air like something sacred. Alexander's jaw trembled. "May I?" She nodded. With shaking hands, he reached for one of the babies, Jacob, and lifted him gently. He cradled the newborn like he was holding glass. Jacob stirred but didn't cry. Instead, one tiny hand gripped Alexander's finger, and in that moment, Alexander broke. Tears slid silently down his face as he stared at the life he helped create. "He's beautiful," he whispered. "They both are." Natalie felt tears welling too, because this wasn't what she expected. She expected coldness, distance, maybe even denial. But the man in front of her, he was completely undone. He handed Jacob back, then knelt beside her hospital bed. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick. "I didn't know. I never got the other letters. I swear, if I had—" He shook his head. "I should have checked. I should have looked for you." Natalie's lip trembled. "I didn't know if you'd care." Alexander's eyes met hers. "How could I not? Natalie, you didn't just give me children. You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have." She blinked. "What's that?" He exhaled, eyes glistening. "A reason to come home." He stood again, hovering. "I want to be a part of their lives," he said quietly. "If you'll let me." Natalie looked down at her sons, sleeping soundly, unaware of the moment unraveling above them. Then she looked at him, this man who had been a stranger, who still, in many ways, was. but whose eyes were now full of something she hadn't seen before. Not charm, not desire, just truth. She nodded. One small nod, and everything shifted. Monica returned an hour later, holding coffee and her phone in one hand. She froze in the doorway when she saw him. Holy Monica, Natalie warned gently. Alexander stood and offered a nervous smile. Hi. I'm Alex. Monica raised a brow. Oh, I know who you are. Later that night, Natalie woke to soft humming. She turned her head. Alexander was sitting in the recliner, shirt rumpled, hair a mess, cradling Owen on his chest. The baby was sleeping. So was he. His hand rested gently on Jacob's bassinet. And Natalie, watching them in the dim hospital glow, felt something stir in her chest. Something quiet. Something terrifying. Something beautiful. Hope, healing doesn't always come with a grand gesture. Sometimes it comes in pieces, in the quiet clink of a bottle warmer, the rustle of diapers at 3 a.m., the way someone says I've got this, and means it. For Natalie, healing began on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. With a suitcase at her door, Alexander moved into the apartment temporarily. Not because it was ideal. It wasn't. His penthouse was 5 times the size, fully staffed, fully stocked, and just 10 minutes away. But when Natalie came home from the hospital with 2 fragile newborns and exhaustion in her bones, he didn't offer his space. He offered his presence. I'll stay here for now, he said, setting the suitcase gently by the door. Not to take over, just to help. Natalie had hesitated. But when she looked at him, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, rocking Jacob in one arm while warming a bottle with the other, she nodded. Okay, we'll try it. Trying turned into surviving. Together, the apartment, once still and solitary, was now filled with motion and sound. Soft cries, bottle burps, the hum of white noise, the thud of Alexander tripping over a bassinet at 2 a.m. Why are these things shaped like traps? He muttered once, hopping on one foot. Natalie had laughed, real laughter, the kind that bubbled up from somewhere unexpected. They developed a rhythm. Natalie handled feedings. Alexander folded laundry with military precision. She soothed Owen's colic. He perfected Jacob's swaddle. There were sleepless nights and spit-up disasters, moments of frustration and near tears. But somehow, they didn't crack. They adapted. Day by day, diaper by diaper, something shifted between them. It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, like waking up to the sun, not a storm. One evening, they sat side by side on the couch, both holding bottles, both covered in burp cloths and defeat. Natalie exhaled. Did you ever imagine this would be your life? Alexander blinked, then chuckled softly. Not even in my most terrifying nightmares. She laughed, then paused. But, he turned toward her. But I wouldn't trade it. Their eyes met. And for the first time, Natalie saw something more than gratitude in his expression. She saw affection, warm, steady, real. There were moments that caught her off guard. The way he sang lullabies off-key, but softly. The way he whispered, "You're doing amazing," when she didn't even know she needed to hear it. The way he always remembered to fill the humidifier and label breast milk and put snacks on the top shelf so she wouldn't have to reach. No one had ever done that for her. Not even close. One night, Jacob wouldn't sleep. Natalie rocked him for hours. Alexander stepped in wordlessly, took the baby, and bounced with the ease of someone who had learned by love, not by instruction. Go lie down, he whispered. I've got him. She did. And when she woke 2 hours later, she found both boys asleep. And Alexander passed out in the nursery chair, his hand resting protectively on Jacob's chest. Something broke open inside her. A wall she didn't know was still standing. They started talking more, about real things. Natalie shared what it was like growing up with a mom who worked double shifts and cried when she thought Natalie was asleep. Alexander talked about the pressure of his last name, how his father's fall from grace turned him into a man who trusted no one. That night, he said one evening, staring out the window, was the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. With you, it was just quiet. Natalie nodded slowly. I felt that too. The emotional closeness grew before either of them realized it. A brush of hands over a changing table, laughter during a 2 a.m. diaper explosion, the way his hand stayed on the small of her back just a second too long. It built and built until it could no longer be ignored. It happened one night after the boys had gone to sleep. Natalie was folding laundry. Alexander was finishing dishes. There was music playing softly, something old and soulful, something that felt like it belonged in this version of their life. Natalie dropped a pair of baby socks and let out a long sigh. They're so small, but they take up everything. Alexander turned, wiped his hands. Yeah, they do. Silence stretched. Then, "You're amazing," he said softly. She turned, startled. "What?" "You're strong, patient, brave. You've been doing this alone for months. And somehow, you still smile at them like they hung the stars." Her eyes misted. "I had to, but you didn't have to let me in." She smiled, but it trembled. "I didn't think I could trust you." "I know." He took a step closer. "But I want you to." And then, silence, but not the kind that hurt, the kind that hummed. That waited, until she whispered, "So do I." Just silence. And then, breath against skin, he tilted toward her slowly, gave her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met gently, cautiously, then again, deeper this time. Natalie pulled back first, heart racing. "This is complicated." Alexander nodded. "I know. And I'm scared." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Me too." And for the first time, neither of them tried to fix it. They just sat with the truth. Together. That night, they didn't sleep apart. They didn't rush. They undressed slowly, kissed like they had all the time in the world, made love like it meant something. Because this time, it did. He touched her like she was breakable. She touched him like she didn't trust the moment would last. And afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, listening for baby cries and hearing only silence, Natalie whispered, "This can't be temporary." Alexander turned to her. "It isn't." That night, they found each other again, but not as strangers, not as people escaping loneliness, as parents, as partners, as two people who had learned to love in the middle of chaos, with stretch marks and spit up, with whispered dreams and shared fears, with hearts that had been broken, but now beat in sync. If you believe love can grow in the messiest places, drop A in the comments, because sometimes the truest love doesn't arrive clean. It arrives tired, but ready. It started with a cry, not the usual one, not hungry, not fussy, not tired. This one was different, sharp, piercing, full of something that made Natalie's blood turn cold. She rushed into the nursery, heart thudding. Jacob was red-faced, eyes barely open, his tiny body limp against the mattress. He was burning up. "Alexander," she shouted, voice cracking as she scooped her son into her arms. He was already running in from the kitchen, dropping a bottle mid-step, panic written all over his face. Natalie's voice trembled. "He's hot, too hot. Something's wrong." Alexander touched Jacob's forehead and froze. "We need to go. Now." The car ride was a blur. Monica stayed behind with Owen while they sped through the rain-slick streets, hazard lights blinking. Natalie sat in the back seat with Jacob cradled to her chest, whispering to him, "Please, stay with me, stay with me." Alexander drove like a man possessed. No music, no words, just the sound of tires slicing through wet pavement and Natalie's choked sobs. Every red light felt like a betrayal. Every second stretched like a lifetime. The ER was a wall of white noise, flashing lights, rushed voices, and the sterile smell of antiseptic. A nurse took Jacob from Natalie's arms and disappeared behind double doors before she could even say goodbye. "Wait, I need..." Alexander caught her before she collapsed. They're helping him, but he didn't sound sure. Not really. They sat in the waiting room, drenched and shaking. Natalie's hands gripped the edges of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Alexander paced like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair over and over again. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Only fear. Raw, primal, unrelenting. A doctor came out 20 minutes later, clipboard in hand. To Natalie, he looked too calm, too composed. She braced herself for the worst. "Your son has a high-grade fever caused by a viral infection. We've stabilized him. He's responding to fluids and medication." Natalie burst into tears. "He's okay?" The doctor nodded gently. "We'll keep him overnight for monitoring, but yes, he's going to be okay." Her knees buckled, and she felt Alexander catch her again. Only this time, she didn't fight the weakness. When they were finally allowed back into the pediatric unit, Jacob was asleep in a tiny crib, wires attached to his chest, a soft beep measuring his heartbeat. Natalie pressed her forehead to his hand. "You scared me," she whispered. "Don't ever do that again." Alexander stood beside her, hands shoved into his pockets. He looked like he'd aged a decade in a day. They stayed the night in the hospital room, Natalie curled in a chair, Alexander on the windowsill. Neither of them slept. They just watched their son breathe. At some point, Natalie whispered into the dark, "I've never been that scared in my life." Alexander didn't look at her. "Me neither." She turned toward him. When the nurse took him from my arms, it felt like someone ripped my heart out. Alexander nodded, swallowing hard. "You don't realize how fragile everything is until it's almost taken away." The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, honest. Alexander stood and crossed the room. Kneeling beside her, he took her hand. "Natalie." She looked into his eyes. "I don't want to be a visitor in his life, or Owen's, or yours." Tears welled again. "I know. I want to be here. Fully. Permanently. Not just because of fear, or guilt, or responsibility, but because I love them. And He hesitated, then finished it. "I love you." Natalie's breath hitched. She looked at her son, then at the man who had walked back into her life and earned a place in it. "You sure you can handle this?" Alexander nodded. "I don't want anything else." Jacob stirred in his sleep. The monitors beeped softly, steady and sure. And for the first time in hours, Natalie smiled. It happened on a Wednesday. Natalie remembered because she was making blueberry pancakes, the first thing the twins had shown interest in beyond mashed bananas. The morning had started quietly, too quietly, until Monica's voice came screeching down the hallway like a siren. "Natalie, do not go online." Too late. There it was, splashed across a gossip site known for its cruelty and accuracy in equal measure. Billionaire Alexander Grant's secret twins, and the woman who trapped him with grainy photos. Of Natalie pushing a stroller, of Alexander holding Owen outside a pediatrician's office, of all three of them walking into her apartment complex. The comments were brutal. "She's a gold digger. Classic trap. I wonder if the twins are even his. Why would a man like that settle for a woman like her?" Natalie dropped her phone. Her knees gave way, and for the second time in her life, she felt the floor disappear beneath her. Alexander was on the phone within minutes. First his attorney, then his PR team, then someone Natalie didn't know, but whose voice sounded terrifyingly calm. She paced. He planned. She cried. He acted. By noon, a second article hit the feeds. This one different, sharper, kinder. It was a statement. His statement. "I have 2 sons, and I love them more than anything in this world. Their mother, Natalie, is the strongest woman I've ever known. She didn't ask for this attention. She didn't want it. And she certainly didn't deserve the vile commentary it's brought. To those who feel entitled to dissect our lives, I ask for your silence. To my sons, when you grow up and read this, I want you to know your father stood by you. From the very beginning." Alexander Grant, it went viral, in a different way. Suddenly the narrative shifted. That's the most human I've ever seen as CEO. But Natalie didn't care about public opinion. Not really. She cared about what came next. Cameras appeared outside her apartment. Strangers loitered at the park. A news van once followed her to the grocery store. Her private world, already delicate, was exposed. She couldn't even take her sons on a walk without feeling watched. "I didn't sign up for this," she whispered one night, rocking Jacob by the window. Alexander stood behind her. "I know. I'm sorry. I don't want them growing up like this." He came closer, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his forehead against the back of her neck. Then, "Let's make it right." He doubled security, moved her out of her apartment and into a secure townhouse under a new lease. But Natalie hesitated. "I don't want to be hidden like some dirty secret." Alexander shook his head. "You're not a secret. You're sacred." Still, the legal world stirred. The story had triggered whispers, custody questions, inheritance rumors. Even Alexander's board of directors got involved. Is this going to become a liability? What if she sues for a piece of the company? Should we initiate a trust and lock her out legally? He shut it down fast. "She's the mother of my children. This isn't a scandal. This is my family." But it wasn't enough. They wanted a meeting. That Thursday, Alexander entered a glass conference room on the 56th floor of the Grant Tech building. The board members were lined up like a firing squad. Natalie sat in the car downstairs with the twins, heart pounding. Inside, Alexander stood at the head of the table, suit sharp, eyes unflinching. He didn't use notes, didn't soften the truth. Yes, I have children. Yes, it was unexpected. No, I'm not ashamed. And if anyone in this room thinks that makes me unfit to lead, I welcome your resignation. The silence was electric. Then came the murmurs, the shifting in seats, the realization he wasn't backing down. Later, he told Natalie what happened. She listened, watched him. You didn't have to do that. I did. Because I won't let anyone shame you, or them, or us. Still, Natalie had doubts. One night, after putting the twins down, she stood in the hallway holding an old photo of her mom, the woman who had raised her with grit and love and no help at all. She whispered, "Am I doing the right thing?" Alexander came up behind her. "What are you thinking?" She didn't turn. "If we make this official, if we become public, will it ever stop feeling dangerous?" He took the photo from her hands, set it on the table, and gently turned her toward him. "I can't promise the world will be kind, but I can promise you'll never face it alone." Later that week, he organized a press interview. Not the kind you rehearse, the kind where you speak human. He sat on a sofa with Natalie beside him, the twins asleep in their car seats at their feet. The reporter asked, "Was this relationship ever about image?" Alexander smiled. "No. It was about timing, and how life has a funny way of giving you what you need when you're least prepared to receive it." That clip reached 2.1 million views in 3 days. But Natalie didn't care about the number. She cared about the truth in his eyes, the quiet steadiness in his voice, the way he reached for her hand without thinking, the way he defended her when she wasn't in the room. One evening, while they were folding laundry, she turned to him and said, "You never asked for this." He looked up. "Neither did you. But you stayed." He walked to her slowly, lifting a tiny onesie between them. "I didn't stay. I chose to be here." She swallowed. "Every day?" He nodded. "Every single one." Later that night, she found a small box in the top drawer of the nursery. Not jewelry, not diamonds, just a handwritten letter, folded once. She opened it. "Natalie, I've lived a long time pretending to have it all together, but I've never been more certain of anything than I am about you, about Jacob, about Owen, about this life. I don't know if you believe in fate, or forgiveness, or family the way I do now, but I believe in you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Alexander, she didn't cry, not this time. Instead, she smiled, because sometimes storms don't come to break you. Sometimes they come to clear the path. There are moments that don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with music swelling or fireworks cracking the sky. They come softly, like sunlight through curtains, like laughter drifting down a hallway, like the stillness of a home that finally feels like one. It was a quiet Sunday morning. No paparazzi, no crises, just warmth. Jacob was bouncing in a baby jumper near the window. Owen was curled against Natalie's chest, thumb in his mouth, refusing to nap. And Alexander was making pancakes, not perfect ones, lumpy, slightly overcooked on one side, but they smelled like cinnamon, and Natalie couldn't stop smiling. She stood in the doorway watching him, shirt sleeves rolled up, baby food on his collar, hair a mess. And in that moment, it hit her. This is what redemption looks like. Not grand gestures, but showing up, again and again and again. Later that night, after the twins were down, Natalie found a single envelope taped to the nursery door. Her name written on it. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, Alexander's handwriting unmistakable. Some things don't need an audience. Some promises aren't meant to be screamed, they're meant to be whispered. "Come downstairs. I've got something to say." Her heart raced. She made her way to the living room. The lights were low, the curtains drawn. There were no rose petals, no cameras, just Alexander, standing barefoot, holding a small velvet box. His eyes met hers, soft and sure. "Before I say anything, I want you to know this isn't pressure." She didn't speak, just nodded. It's not to fix anything. It's not because of guilt or obligation or expectation. He stepped closer. It's because I'm in love with you, Natalie. Fully, freely, fiercely. Her eyes welled. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with 3 stones. One for each of them. 1 stone for the night we met. 1 for the boys who changed everything. And 1 for the future I want. With you. He took a breath. Natalie, will you marry me? She didn't say yes right away. She stepped forward, pressed her forehead against his, and whispered, only if we promise to keep choosing each other, on the good days and the hard ones. He smiled. Every day, forever. Then, yes. Through tears, through laughter. Yes, they didn't tell the twins right away. But somehow, the boys knew. They clapped during breakfast the next morning for no reason at all, as if their tiny hearts understood something words couldn't explain. They got married 2 months later, in the backyard of their new home. Monica officiated, barely keeping it together through her speech. The twins wore tiny bow ties. Jacob tried to eat the ring pillow. Owen fell asleep during the vows. And Natalie? She wore a simple ivory dress and bare feet. Because what mattered wasn't the ceremony. It was the life they'd built. 1 diaper, 1 sleepless night, 1 soft promise at a time. Later that night, after the last guest had gone, Natalie lay in bed beside Alexander. Their hands rested over her belly. Soft, still, she smiled into the dark. We should probably tell them tomorrow. Alexander's eyes widened. Are you serious? She nodded, laughing. Surprise. He groaned. You planned this. You totally planned this. I did not. You have a thing for dramatic reveals. She giggled. He kissed her. Outside, the stars blinked like slow heartbeats. Inside, a family grew, quietly, wildly, with love poured into every crooked corner. The day they signed the marriage certificate was also the twins' first birthday. A full circle, 2 babies born from 1 impossible night, now wrapped in the arms of a family they'd taught how to love. But Natalie didn't stop there. Marriage didn't erase who she was. It amplified it. 3 months later, she launched a blog. Mother interrupted. She wrote about love, fear, single motherhood, co-parenting, choosing to trust again. Her posts went viral, not because they were flashy, but because they were honest. You can rebuild your heart, even if it was shattered quietly. Love isn't just who stays, it's who listens. She got emails, DMs, women thanking her for not sugarcoating it. One woman wrote, "Your story gave me hope the day I thought I had none." Natalie cried reading that, then wrote back, "We rebuild in small steps, keep walking." Later that year, she started a small nonprofit called Tiny Steps, offering childcare support, therapy referrals, and community grants for single moms. Alexander funded the first 2 years, quietly, but Natalie ran it, with fire, because her pain had grown purpose, and her survival had bloomed into strength. 1 year after their wedding, they hosted a cookout in their backyard. Family, friends, laughter echoing through open windows. The sun was golden, the grass soft under bare feet. The twins, now toddlers, chased each other across the lawn, Jacob squealing, Owen stumbling behind him, giggling. Alexander stood beside Natalie, arm around her waist. Think they know how lucky they are. She leaned into him. They don't need to. They're too busy living it. A moment of stillness, breeze rustling the trees, sunlight catching the sparkle of the ring on her finger. And Natalie whispered, almost to herself, "We made it." Alexander kissed her temple. "We're just getting started." Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the ones that begin with perfection. They're the ones that rise from ashes, that grows through fear, and learn to bloom. In spite of the past, Natalie had once believed her story was a cautionary tale. Now it was a love letter. To second chances, to messy beginnings, to the kind of love that finds you in the most unexpected places and stays. If you believe love can still find us, even after life has broken us, share this story with someone who needs to believe again.